Hello, and welcome to our final lecture on eukaryotes in the prokaryotes versus eukaryotes module. This is where we will talk about other important eukaryotes, um, basically just the helminths that we haven't talked about yet, and a whole nother class of eukaryotes that we can see that carry these pathogens, and those are called arthropods, or insects and arachnids, namely mites. So let's get into it. So as discussed before, we talk about parasitic helminths as um, microorganisms, as one of the six microorganisms, and here you can see hookworms inside of an intestine. And the reason we study uh, helminths is because of the eggs. The eggs are actually microscopic, and so you can't see them without a microscope. You can ideally test for them, and vets across the nation do this every day. They do test the feces of pets, and if you were to become a vet tech, you would probably be doing this test. You would do a fecal float where you make the density of your water uh, much higher by adding salt to it. When you add the fecal sample to it, any parasitic eggs have a density of about water, and so they will float instead of stay in the middle or sink because their density is now less than the salt water. Okay, so they'll float, and then we stick a cover slip on there and grab it, and then we observe it. We'll actually do that in the lab, but it's really important to remember that helminths are studied as microscopic microorganisms because of their reproductive cycle. Okay, and um, they usually are carried by vectors. Sometimes you can get them in the soil, but like heartworms, for instance, are carried by arthropods. And that is where we'll get to here. And you can look in the notes and you can see all these names of all these different types of creatures. The important thing to remember is A all the way over there is not an insect, okay, because you count the legs, it's got 8 legs, so that's likely a mite, um, but it is an arachnid, all right. And so all the others with 6 legs, and you have the flea here, you have a housefly, um, and a mosquito. The mosquitoes are one of the biggest ones, arthropod vectors. Okay, and so a vector again is something that can carry a disease. A mechanical vector carries it on itself, and it kind of just passes it through touching you, maybe touching you over a wound, something like that. But a biological vector is when the um, parasite or pathogen has a piece of their life cycle within the vector. Okay, so if it grows and divides or is in a specific stage within the vector, then it would probably be in a different stage when it gets into its host. Okay, so like we said, if you count the legs, 1, 2, 3, 4 times 2 is 8. They are not an insect, and so that's why we go one step up and we call them arthropod vectors. Okay, and even further, as mentioned in our virus lab or virus lectures, you can call them uh, arbo diseases, arbopathogens, arboviruses, depending on what it is. Okay, and mites like this transfer rickets. We saw them in the prokaryote section also. The insect vectors are mostly obvious. You can see the mosquito biting somebody here, but fleas, lice, flies, mosquitoes, all that kind of brings some form of disease into humans, with mosquitoes being the most important one. So if you have any standing water around your house, I advise you to get rid of it because mosquito eggs don't can't live in running water. So if you have any stagnant water anywhere, it's likely that there's mosquitoes in there. All right, and that will conclude our eukaryotic lectures.